All right. Welcome, everyone, to Be Kind Rewind. This is a panel on VHS and DVD, basically the history of physical media. My name is Mark McPherson. I'm a film critic for TwinCitiesGeek.com, MoviesWithMark.com, and FilmInquiry.com. And I've also worked in a video store around like 2003, 2004, and 2007, 2008. So big component of like the VHS era. Love it. So on this panel, we're basically going to talk about kind of like the history behind like VHS. It's not just going to be like, oh, remember the era. We'll talk a little bit about the video store and the nature of physical media, as well as the future that it holds. So like VHS, like this wonderful little thing called VHS. So when VHS first came about, like it came about during a time when, it was a little bit of a tough sell. It was seen as kind of like a new wave of home entertainment. There was a lot of consideration of like the direction that it was going to take, as well as a fear of the influence that it could have. So with VHS tapes, like, there've been like a few formats that have been developed at the time. A lot of people tell you that there was the big battle between VHS and Blu-rays. So basically like the difference between like VHS and Blu-rays is that like VHSs typically looked like this, like your standard VHS, and then you have Blu-rays, which were a little bit smaller, but in some cases they were a lot bulkier. Like I've seen Blu-rays that were like, maybe about like 75% of this size to just like massively like twice or three times as much the size, depending on how you used it. Like for the longest time, like Betamax was actually used like for a long time in film production. And like the main difference between VHS and Betamax was mostly had to do with like there was a few factors to it. So the main difference was that VHS could carry like longer amounts of footage on it. So it was possible to fit like a 2 hour, or in some case, if you're lucky, like a 3 hour film on one VHS tape. Whereas with Blu-ray, it could typically only hold roughly about like a little bit over an hour in some cases, but it had better quality. So like essentially the battle between like VHS and Blu-ray, no, sorry, Betamax eventually came down to like the whole idea of of like quality versus quantity, more or less. There's a few other contributing factors, like Betamax was a little bit more owned by Sony, and they had a little bit. They weren't as willing to expand with it into other areas, namely more adult entertainment. That wasn't as big in the minds for like the future Betamax machines. So like VHS kind of expanded by allowing for more like longer tape and for more exposure of content. Because like the biggest thing to promote VHS at the time was that you could use it to record stuff. Like Betamax, you could record stuff, but because it had a limited time frame for how much you could record, it wasn't as appealing for people who wanted to record movies or like more episodes of their favorite TV series, or for sports games. So it wasn't as like applicable for it. So there's all these little contributing factors that went into making VHS like the ultimate winner of that era. Now there are a few different like types of VHS as the years went on. Like VHS became like they started improving the quality of it. VHS was actually used for quite a few things. It's actually been used for data collection at some points, like the same way that like computer data would be written onto like like reel-to-reel type devices. VHS also had its places like storage facilities as well, just because it was it was magnetic data. It was taking it in. So the thing with like with VHS was that it really took off, and they tried to improve it as much as they could because they realized this was a big format. So they actually tried to expand it into higher quality. So there was a time where you had stuff like WVHS, which was said to have like HD quality. Like you could get up to as high as like, like 1080p quality in some rare cases. The big thing about VHS too, though, is that while it did take off at the same time as Betamax, VHS was really expensive during the time. And it's mainly because it was kind of like, it was fairly new, and you wanted to promote it, as like, like something big for the home. And you don't have to go to the theater. You can just buy it once and then watch it at home as much as you want. And this was kind of seen as like it was going to be seen as like a killer of the theaters. And this happens ever so often. Like I've talked about this numerous times. Like there's always a moment where movie theaters think that this new technological breakthrough is going to destroy movie theaters and nobody is going to go see movies again. Like even before VHS, this happened with television. Television came about, they realized you could show movies on television, and a lot of studios who relied on movie theaters to show their reruns were basically like, oh no, like all their movies are going to television. What are we going to do? Theaters are done for. And of course, theaters weren't done for. They kept going. But VHS had the same thing happen as well. VHS came out. It's like, they can buy it at home. They're just going to wait for it. They're not going to go to the movie theater. And people still went to the movie theater. They still wanted to see films on the big screen. And so because of this, like VHS, because they were kind of worried about it, because you could keep watching it as many times as you want, you wouldn't have to keep going to the theater and paying for it. So a lot of VHS tapes were ridiculously expensive. And when I mean ridiculously expensive, I'm talking between like $80 and $100. And this is in like 1980s money. So it was ridiculously expensive. So to buy a VHS tape was a huge investment, because it meant you were basically had to get your money's worth. You would have to watch a tape at least 12 times just to get your money's worth out of it. Well, come to think of it, back then, ticket prices were lower, so you probably have to watch it like 30 times to get you get your money's worth from it. But then you might be wondering, well, how could VHS take off if it was so expensive back then? And this is basically where video stores came into play. So video stores realized that, video stores weren't really a thing. They were like VHS tapes were kind of offered at electronic stores that sold like players and stuff like that. And VHS tapes were really, really expensive. So this one video store, sorry, I keep saying video store. It's an electronics store. Didn't start off as a video store. This electronics store decided that, well, you know what? We can rent out our equipment and machines that are really expensive. Why don't we do this for VHS tapes as well? Why don't we just rent them out? It's like we realize these tapes are so expensive, but people want to see it. Let's just rent it out. So initially, I believe they started off renting it off where it was a club. It was called like the family movie club. You could go to the store, you'd register for it, and like you could take one of these tapes home and watch it for a while. And that eventually expanded into one of the first video store franchises in 1985, which was Family Video. And Family Video actually continued on for the longest time. Just they just kept renting out tapes, and eventually they dropped the whole club thing, because initially it was like a Costco type thing. You'd have to pay for a membership and then pay to rent the tape. I think it was like something like $60 or something like that for the membership, and then I think like renting a tape was like, I think it was something like 10 or 15 bucks, somewhere around there. But it was pretty expensive. But when you consider the fact that, look, it's a $100 tape, and I can rent it for only $15 if I'm in this club, of course it's a bargain. So you would do that. So then, video stores expanded from that. You had more independent cinemas that came, independent video stores that came about from it. And they realized, oh, we could rent tapes too. We could make an investment and then rent it out. And then because it's so high in demand that people want to watch movies at home, we can make our money back. So we could buy $100 tape, and as long as it gets rented, like 20 or 30 amount of times, we've made our money back, and we can keep making profit off of it. So eventually this took off as an industry that we eventually got to stuff like, like Hollywood Video and Blockbuster Video was like the huge one on the block, pardon the pun. But Blockbuster Video basically became like the huge franchise of it and established two precedents. The first one was Blockbuster kind of became like the dominant, almost kind of like monopoly on video stores, which is why a lot of people, when you look back on that era, a lot of people hate Blockbuster. A lot of people hate it, especially like small business owners, because Blockbuster would basically come into a town, they'd see all the video stores that were there, and they would try to buy them up. They would just say, like, look, just transform this into a Blockbuster organization, and we'll let you in on our franchise. And the important thing about that was that it also opened them up to the deals that Blockbuster had. So, like, because video rentals became more common, you started having studios taking note of this and basically setting up deals where the deal was like, okay, look, you want to rent movies, we will set it up so that we will supply you with the newest movies, the newest releases, as long as we can strike a deal, as long as we get royalties and some of that money comes back to us. And as long as it does, we can supply you with a lot of tapes, a lot of videos. We can send them right your way. Um, and what's interesting is that that Blockbuster and Hollywood Video would do this, but Family Video actually kind of went the opposite route. Family Video was interesting in that they were kind of like the smarter chain because they made like an investment in their material. Um, like for one, they decided to buy their videos outright. So like the way that this goes about, like if you want to start a video store, you can either do one of two things to get your videos. You can either strike up a deal with distributors to have a certain amount of royalties paid, and they'll send you all the videos that you need, or you can just buy a copy at a retail price and then push it out for rental. And you can do this all the time. In fact, I worked at a Hollywood Video and we actually did this as a practice. So this is a little bit about like how the sausage was made, but there was a time when the newly established Weinstein Company had access to like Quentin Tarantino films, and they had struck up an exclusive deal with Blockbuster, saying like, only available at Blockbuster. You can find Planet Terror and Death Proof. And the thing is, Hollywood Video they got around this. So it's like, oh, you struck up a deal? Well, we can get around this if we just go out to the store, buy the copies, and then put them on the shelf, which you could do. In fact, that's what like a lot of independent video stores do. That's what like the Last Blockbuster currently in America does right now. So like there was a time when I was working at a Hollywood, and typically what would happen in the morning is you would make a trip to the bank to like get the last night's deposit into the bank. But instead of just putting all the money in the bank, a certain amount of money would be set aside to go out to like Best Buy or Target, whichever video retailer there was at the time, and just buy up the copies that they didn't get a deal on. You'd bring them back to the store, you'd put them into the system, and you'd throw them up on the shelf as quickly as you could. And that's basically what Family Video did for the longest time. And what was great about that was if you bought the tape, bought the video, you didn't have to pay royalties for it. You bought it and you can do whatever you want with it. You can rent it out, you can sell it off, as long as it's not violating like the any like trade laws, stuff like that, you're fine. You can do whatever you want with it. And the other thing that Family Video did too was very rare, and no video store did this, was they actually got into real estate and bought the actual land that their stores were on. So whereas like Blockbuster and Hollywood Video, they would have to pay rent on their the property that they were going to buy, that they were going to establish on. Family Video just bought the land outright, so that they wouldn't have to pay the fees that you would typically have to pay with that. So that's why Family Video actually lasted for the longest time. And for a time, they actually opened up a new store about 10 years ago within New Hope. Now, of course, Family Video has gone more downhill since then, and that store has shut its doors since. But it was actually kind of interesting. I found it interesting that Family Video was continuing on a little bit longer than you would expect most video stores to. So, so we'll talk a little bit more about like about the tech behind VHS. So, one of the things that I encountered when I was working at the video store was dealing with people who would complain about widescreen. So if you can see on this copy of Akira here, it says that it is the widescreen version. So widescreen, people were trying to make like this, like Siskel and Ebert tried to make the argument that, look, you got to get widescreen because that will show you the most picture. The thing was, everyone's televisions at the time were, as you can see over here, typical tube television was 4x3, square box. Whereas when you go to the film theater, whereas when you go to the theater, it's about as long as, well, the video you're seeing right now. It's like this big. So if you want to compact it to that, you gotta obviously gotta like push it down. But a lot of people didn't like that, so they had what was called the full screen version, or the pan and scan version. Now, in a lot of cases, if the size of the screen for a film was about like a 185 aspect ratio, so pretty much like about the same size as the video you're seeing right here. The video you're looking at right here is about a 185. It typically wouldn't be too hard as long as we're in a lot of like long shots, or as long as characters weren't too far on the other sides of the screen, they could compact it in just fine. Like they might have to like move it every now and then, but typically you wouldn't have to worry too much about it. However, a lot of films were shot in like the wider screen aspect, which is like about like roughly 235. So think of it as this screen that you're looking at right now, but like black bars about like right here, and it would be wider, so you'd see a lot more of the screen. Um, but the problem with that was that if it was that like smaller, then you would have to get a little bit closer to it. And a lot of times when that would happen, you would get what's called like the panning and the scanning, which became really distracting. The worst culprit of this is Ghostbusters. Ghostbusters has a lot of widescreen sequences that use up the entire screen, and as a result of this, you get this really like jerky scanning back and forth between characters to make sure everyone's in the shot, and you lose a lot of material with that. So like one character could be on the side of the screen talking, and the other character could be over here, and so they would have one cut here when that character's talking, this character cut over here, and this made it really hard if there was like back and forth going between the characters, because either you'd have to make quick cuts or you'd have to like scan back and forth, and it became really distracting at the time. So yeah, like so like they really stressed how like widescreen you are getting more content with that. And this wasn't just an era of like VHS. Like when DVDs came about, people still had they still had televisions like this, like the big tube TV that you're seeing before you. uh HD TVs were still a little bit of a luxury. So when DVDs came about, and they had the anamorphic screen, a lot of people were like, I don't want that. I want the full screen version. I want it to fill the whole screen. Um, and like it was like it was a pointless endeavor to try to explain to them, look, if you get full screen, eventually when you get HD TV and a flat screen that's like wide, you're gonna regret it. Because like the thing is, like if you've ever watched your full screen DVDs on an HD TV, you'll notice that it really pushes it pushes, instead of having like the black bars on the top and the bottom, now you've got black bars on the side, because you're getting a square picture that was meant for tube TVs that is now being projected onto an HD television. Now, technically, if you want, you can zoom in to get around this, but then you're still cutting off more of the screen and you're getting even less content. And I really hated this, because that they still made full screen DVDs. That aggravated me to no end, because a lot of times they would screw this up. The worst culprit of this was the first big DVD release of Back to the Future. They released Back to the Future in this big like trilogy box, and I was like, oh, this looks so cool, I can't wait. And then you bring it home, and it's literally the full screen version. Like it said it was going to be like the widescreen version, and it's not. It's the full screen version, and I believe it actually tries to like place the black bars on top, and they're like, no, it's the widescreen version, as though everyone just had tube TVs and they wouldn't notice. Um, this is also one of like the troubling aspects with when they released like the most pure version of Star Wars that you can find right now is and I think I have those here. It's right here. Yep. This is like the most pure version of the Star Wars trilogy that you can find. And it's mainly because these DVDs have the Laserdisc scan. The problem is, like, the Laserdisc is the closest you're going to get to the original trilogy in more of like a digital format. The problem is, because it's a Laserdisc scan, the Laserdisc versions are not anamorphic widescreen. So what you're getting when you have this is you're getting a 4:3 picture of the letterboxed format of that. So for a lot of people, like these came out in like 2006 when people still had tube TVs, and they're just like, well, it looks fine. What's the difference? And then you watch it on HD TV and you realize, oh, okay, I get what's going on here. So there was like a lot of educating that had to go on with making sure that like people understood the difference between like between widescreen and full screen. So yeah, there's a whole big feature by Gene Siskel and Roger Ebert they did on their show At the Movies where they talked about the benefits of widescreen to kind of let people in on it, you know. Yeah, so yeah, like we had to push like a widescreen on that because it was troubling because a lot of the VHS tapes you got were not widescreen. You had to go looking for it. Like in particular, this is like if you can see it here, this is the special limited edition of Akira. And the only thing that's like special about it is that it's widescreen. So you can see everything of it that you would see in the theater. Because like typically most people only got the version that had like Kinect on the motorcycle, the full screen version. That's the version you found most at video stores. So let's talk about yeah, Laserdiscs. Yeah, Laserdiscs were like kind of the very like the cream of the crop of like the quality. So if you wanted like extra quality, you would go for Laserdisc, which are basically kind of like DVDs, except think of like DVDs the size of vinyls. And this actually was kind of like a cool thing to think about with it, you know, because you had laser discs. They were giant, so they look like vinyl, which meant you had giant vinyl covers for your films. So it's really cool just to look at like the packaging. Like I mean, like VHS and like DVD and stuff is nice like that, but to have you know like something as big as like a vinyl cover is really cool to show off. So laser discs had better quality. For one, they were easier to freeze frame because like you know they were digitally coming off a disc, so you could freeze frame and not have to worry about jitters. So basically, anytime that you would pause a VHS tape, there was always like a lot of like feedback. So like if we didn't have like copyright, I would actually like pop this in and show you. But anytime you pause the VHS tape, there was always like a lot of like blurry static, depending on your player and what you were using. With Laserdisc, you would just freeze frame it, and it just be perfectly on there. It'd just be a perfect still frame. The other cool thing about Laserdisc too was that it was kind of like the forerunner to DVD, because a lot of the special features that we take for granted on DVD actually started off on Laserdisc. In particular, they had different audio tracks that you could have on a Laserdisc, which opened up a whole realm of possibilities. This meant you could have director's commentary over a film, which was a huge thing at the time. It's like, oh, you can watch a film and have a director talk about it as you watch it. The other thing big too, which was for anime, was that you could switch between English and the Japanese dialogue. You could have both, because the thing that a lot of anime fans don't realize is that you had to make a choice if you wanted to buy anime on VHS. You had to buy either subtitled or dubbed. And there's a lot that went into choosing which one you got. Mainly because there was a huge price difference. Dubbed anime would range anywhere from like $20 to $25, and subtitled anime would run anywhere from 30 to 40, and in some case $50, depending on where you went. The biggest culprit of this was Viz. Viz Video charged you a lot. Like I believe this VHS tape back in the day, like this is like the first volume of Ranma. This cost roughly about $30 to $35. There were a few benefits to it, like on the tape, on the subtitle version, you've got 3 episodes. The dub version, you only got 2 episodes. But there was a lot that went into, you know, making this choice. So a lot of anime fans just kind of ended up getting dubbed anime VHS tapes just because it was easier. You know, it was cheaper than that. It was kind of like one of like the big like you know claims. It's like, dude, check it out. I got subbed anime. I shelled out the extra $10 to get the subbed anime. It also made it really troubling for like video stores, because like some of them would have to make the choices between, you know, were they going to have dubbed anime or were they going to have it subtitled. In some cases, you didn't have a choice. It was either all dubbed in many cases with like the streamline stuff. Pretty much all the streamline anime was dubbed, or it was only stuff that was dubbed, like stuff from Animego. Animego used to only just do subbed anime, and that used to be their tagline. Their tagline was literally movies you can read. Eventually, Animego did get into dubbing when they realized that, hey, anime dubbing was a bit of a big thing. But it was frustrating because like video stores would sometimes fluctuate between a whole series. Like a perfect example, Hollywood Video, they would have the complete run of Bubblegum Crisis, but like volumes 1, 3, 4, and 6 would be dubbed, and then volumes 2 and so on would be subtitled. So I'd have to watch like some of it dubbed and some of it subtitled. This happened with Evangelion too. They had all of Evangelion, but I believe like the last 2 volumes were only subtitled, and like the other volumes and a few other volumes in between were only subtitled, and the rest were dubbed. Which made it was so aggravating, because at the time, like I can understand with Animego because they were slowly getting into dubbing, but with like Evangelion, they had the dub and the subtitle out at the same time. So it was just random. It was just like sometimes you get dubbed anime, sometimes you get it subbed. It was a luck of the draw, It's not like the day where you lucky ass kids, you get to get the whole season set, and you get it in English and Japanese. That's why when DVD came about, when DVD happened, it was like a godsend. It's like you didn't have to invest in Laserdiscs, which Laserdiscs were still pretty expensive at the time. They weren't as expensive as like the early days of VHS when it was like $100. It could range anywhere from about like $50 to $70 on that. So it wasn't the worst thing in the world. But then when DVD came about, it was like $30, and you can get the English and the Japanese version. So it's like perfect. I don't have to choose. I can get the best of both worlds. And a lot of people flock to that. I mean, and then of course, all the benefits of Laserdisc came with that as well. Audio commentaries, interviews and featurettes, stuff that would have to be contained on other parts of the disc, you could now select and just go from there. You had tons of great special features that came about. Another special feature that has been retired, which I kind of loved, and I might do a video on it sometime, is the nature of like DVD-ROM content. I found this absolutely fascinating because when you started having DVD drives in computers, you could put your DVD in there, and there would be specific stuff that you could only access on your computer. Perfect example of this was Pulp Fiction. If you pop Pulp Fiction into your computer, you can load up the DVD-ROM, and you can actually bring up the script that plays that scrolls along as you watch the film. There's also a lot of bizarre stuff. Like if you look on like Terminator 2 and stuff like The Abyss, there's actually games on there. There's DVD-ROM games that you can play. I'm not even sure if those would still work anymore. I'd have to try them out. I do have like a lot of old that do that, so I should definitely check that out sometime. But what's interesting, since we're talking about DVDs, when DVDs came about, it was actually interesting because there wasn't like a war that went on with DVDs, and it would seem like there would be, because there were competing formats of like mini disc and DivX discs at the time, which were kind of bizarre. Like DivX discs were kind of like the expiring type. Like they had this whole deal where you would rent a DivX disc and it would just expire after 48 hours, so you wouldn't have to worry about returning it. No more late fees, except then you'd have a big pile of broken DivX discs. So wasn't very economic, wasn't very environmentally friendly, obviously. And then you had stuff like like the mini disc stuff, which was kind of interesting, but they didn't really take off. The DVD was interesting because there wasn't a huge battle. It was basically a lot of people from the entertainment industry gathered together and tried to agree upon what would be the next format. So it was less of like a war between like VHS and Betamax at the time. It was more like, let's come to a diplomatic agreement. And yes, DVD was going to be the future. There wasn't any like competing format. Just like, look, this is the next format. We're gonna go through with it. It works. It's flexible. We can make players out of it. It's fine. Go to the next one. That's it. And once DVD started taking off, it was interesting because then you started to see VHS releases kind of slow. Like they weren't gone from the market. But in the early 2000s, you started seeing releases be delayed. So in other words, like VHS versions would take like longer to come out, and DVDs would come first. So I remember this happened with it happened with a few anime titles, but it happened with stuff like Scary Movie like 3 or something like that. Like the DVD would come out early, and then like a few weeks later, maybe like a month later, the VHS would come out. So VHS was on its way out the door. And I actually loved when this happened because it meant that they were going to get rid of VHS. And this was like a golden age for they were retiring a format, and this was kind of like open season on VHS tapes. Like if you seriously, if you're a time traveler and you're big into VHS and you want to collect it, the best time to go back in time and grab as much as you can would be 2004 to 2005. Because around that time, like the last VHS tape wouldn't be made until like 2005, 2006, I believe, with the film A History of Violence was like the last VHS film. But around this time, video stores were trying to get rid of as much VHS as they could. And they had a lot of VHS at the time because the thing was like VHS opened up this market for films that couldn't otherwise go to theaters, mainly horror films that couldn't be sold as well. A lot of people will, to go back a little bit further here to the 80s, there was the era of what's known as the video nasties, which was basically horror films that were too grotesque. They couldn't sell them to studios, and they could only exist on VHS. So a lot of directors, filmmakers decided to just forego theaters and just go straight to video. And as a result, you had a lot of like very independent films just favor VHS. So you had a lot of like bizarre horror films that would end up on VHS. This also opened up the market for a lot of other stuff like exercise videos, educational videos, demonstrational videos, travel logs. So like video stores had like these huge sections for all this stuff. Like I remember when I worked at the video store, there was a whole section just for travel logs and stuff like that, and just for like exercise videos. So all sorts of like crazy stuff, and it was crowding out the video stores that were trying to stock more DVDs. So they started getting rid of like a lot of like more VHS tapes, and they got rid of them for ridiculously low prices. And I gravitated towards this because I was like, you know what? Like formats will come and go. All I really care about is if I can watch this, watch this at home and collect it. And this came about for me when I went to a long forgone video store called CD Warehouse, which sold used VHS and CDs. And I popped in there one day in 2004, and there on the shelf was all of Robotech, every single tape. And like these were like a ton of tapes in the Robotech line. There's 85 episodes dubbed, and there's 2 episodes of tape. So there's like over 40 tapes on the wall. And I was just like, oh my God, how much is this? And they told me, well, it's about 75 cents a tape, because they were getting rid of VHS tapes. Like, got yourself a deal. So I came out of there with just like trash bags of VHS tapes. And this happened too with when video stores started getting rid of all the VHS tapes. When this happened, it was kind of like the biggest garage sale ever. Like every single VHS tape in the video store of like Blockbuster in Hollywood, they were selling for 50 cents a tape. So tapes that typically would cost you like $100 back in the 80s were now 50 cents. So everyone gravitated towards it. I went out of there with like garbage bags for days just trying to get out all of this stuff, especially because at the time, everyone was flocking to DVD, but there was so much material that wasn't on DVD at the time that I wanted to collect. So like stuff like Ralph Bakshi stuff wasn't as common for DVD, and a lot of like obscure stuff that has yet to be on DVD, like bizarre stuff like the Internet Show, which was a educational video about how to use the internet and how to recognize trolls and flamers from 1993. So all this like fun nostalgic stuff to dig through that was really cheap and just ushered out of the era. So then after DVD, It wasn't too long. Like, VHS was pretty much all gone by, from the video store by 2006. So then you had Blu-ray come about. But before that, we had to have another format war between Blu-ray and HD DVD. And this was kind of an interesting issue because Blu-ray actually succeeded more. A lot of people thought that Blu-ray wouldn't take off because it was again under like the banner of Sony. And a lot of people looked at like the history of like Sony and how they dealt with Betamax and realizing that, they might lose this one. The only problem was like they had a bit of an advantage in that Blu-ray, it had more space. It had better video. It had not as many security locks on it as HD DVD had. And also like they were more confident in Blu-ray. Like Blu-rays just came out as Blu-rays. And if you look at any like HD DVD that came out during that time under the red banner, they were dual format because they realized that, it is a little iffy. I'm not sure if we want to pursue this. Let's have both formats on there. And thankfully, this was like once Blu-ray became like the dominant winner. I remember it was like a big thing. Like I actually worked in a video production house at the time, and it was like a huge celebration. It's like the war's over, Blu-ray is the winner. So it's like finally we can start writing our content for clients on Blu-rays and just throw out all our HD DVDs. So yeah, that came about, and then of course and then of course streaming came about soon after that, and that again was seen as like that was kind of like a lot of people think that streaming is like the killer of the video store. In fact, the moment that Netflix started delving into streaming content, that was kind of like signaling as like the beginning of the end. It's like, well, why even go to the video store anymore when you can just stream it straight from home? And keep in mind, at the time when Netflix started off this, they had like nothing on there. Like it's the equivalent of like if you were to go on like Crackle and see what they got. Like it was like, like this low budget indie film is on there that no one's heard of. Key-Man and the Masters of the Universe is on there, but it's like the full screen format. So it was like very like rinky dink at the time, but it was kind of seen as revolutionary because obviously it did, eventually build up to, more exclusive streaming content. And then, along with that came Amazon Prime and, and then Shudder and HBO Max and Disney Plus and all that. Now, when the video store got killed off, there was a lot of speculation was that Netflix was the culprit behind it, and indeed, Netflix played a huge part in taking the revenue away from Blockbuster, like when from Blockbuster and like Hollywood Video. In fact, when I worked at Hollywood Video at the time, one of the biggest complaints from people who had to pay late fees was they said, screw this, I'm going to Netflix. That was the biggest thing. And keep in mind at the time, this was when Netflix just operated as like a mail service. You get movies in the mail, you get them at your house, you mail them back, and you get more DVDs from off your queue. So it was a different time then. So a lot of people think that Netflix was the main culprit behind this, especially when you consider that Blockbuster had a chance to buy Netflix and decided not to, and they said, "Oh, that was a bad idea." And here's the thing, it's not so much that Netflix came about as much as it was a bad business practices. Both Blockbuster and Hollywood Video made some really, really poor choices. The biggest problem was that Blockbuster at the time, it was expanding way too fast. They were trying to do way, way, way too much at the time. Like, I'm not sure if a lot of people remember this, but there was a time when Blockbuster was trying to get into music. So they were going to try to sell music CDs. When they were getting into video games, they were trying to do every video game they could find. They were even like renting Game Boy games for a while, which is kind of weird. They were even trying to set up like these big kind of like I'm trying to find the right word to describe. It's kind of like an entertainment center, similar to like basically the equivalent of like Dave and Buster's. They were trying to make that type of like store. And they were expanding way too fast. Like there was apparently at one point there was a store opening like every few hours in America for how much they were expanding. And they basically made bad business choices. One of the things they wanted to do was they wanted to compete with Netflix by having their own mail service. And they had an edge here where they could say, like, look, not only is it the same thing as Netflix, but you don't have to mail your stuff back to Netflix. You can come back to the store, hand it to our staff, they'll scan it back in, and you can just get more movies from there. So if you can't wait, you can go over to Blockbuster and do that. But then because of that, they tried to expand even further. They had this whole campaign where they were going to abolish late fees. And it was seen as like a revolutionary thing at the time. No more late fees ever again. And then, of course, this meant that there was a huge, huge loss of money for the company. So bad idea. They lost a lot of money. They ended up closing stores, and that was kind of like the beginning of the end. Hollywood Video made a similar problem. Hollywood Video kind of stuck to their guns in that they wanted to say, look, we're not going to do what Blockbuster's going to do. You know, we have faith and, you know, the customer experience and all that. We're just going to continue to be the best video store we are. The problem was they had tried to compete with Blockbuster by buying up Mr. Movies. And they didn't really get a lot of money from Mr. Movies. And in fact, Mr. Movies went into bankruptcy. And because they had to inherit all this debt from taking over Mr. Movies organizations, stores, this basically led to them losing money. And stores started slowly shutting down from there. And there was basically like the beginning of the end there. And I mention this because like Family Video didn't really make terrible business practices. I mean, eventually, yes, they did succumb to, you know, the market, you know, succumbing more to streaming services, but they hung in there for the longest time where they could still open up stores and still maintain a presence as a video store during that time. And like I said, it mainly had to do with their business practices. They didn't strike up deals with distributors. They bought their own rental copies that they could do with as they pleased. In fact, one of the big things that they did was they put them for sale on the shelf. They say, hey, do you like this film? Well, you can pick it right off the shelf and buy it if you want. Here's the price. Come up and get it. So you didn't have to like look through like the bargain bin or whatever. You could just buy it right off the shelf, which was convenient. They bought their own land, so they didn't have to worry about, you know, paying pricing and everything like that. And the other key thing too about Family Video, which was such a genius move, I'm surprised that Blockbuster didn't capitalize on it, was that they teamed up with a pizza chain to be connected to the video store. So basically, during the 2010s, you had Family Video and this place called Marco's Pizza, and they were working in tandem. They were like literally connected as a store, and I mean like connected at the hip. So to give you an idea, here's the Family Video store, here's Marco's Pizza. In between there is actually a window in between the new release wall where you can actually place an order while you're waiting, place an order for pizza while you go pick up videos. And even more ingenious was that not only could you get a deal on like videos and pizza, but you could actually task the delivery driver with returning your tapes. So in other words, if you don't want to make the trip to the store, you could just order a delivery pizza from Marco's Pizza and have them bring your DVDs back to the store for you. It was such an ingenious thing. You're kind of surprised that like Blockbuster and Hollywood never capitalized on that stuff, because pizza and videotapes just kind of went hand in hand. That, I mean, you talk about anyone who's grown up in like the 90s when that was like kind of the heyday of that. They always talked about how, Friday nights you'd go out, you get a pizza, you'd rent videotapes, and that was kind of like the ritual of the era. A lot of great memories from that. You surprised that, Blockbuster wouldn't take note of that. But then again, they were too busy opening up too many stores and too many franchises. In particular, if you go and there's a documentary out right now on Netflix, which is called like The Last Blockbuster, which details a little bit more of the history behind it. It follows how the last Blockbuster in Oregon currently operates, and it's similar to the stuff I mentioned, like going out to video stores to buy, going up to retail stores to buy up tapes. They still rely on old technology and stuff like that, but they talk a lot about the history. And they don't quite sugarcoat it. Like they fluctuate between like, filmmakers talking about it nostalgically and fans talking about it nostalgically, and then other filmmakers and business people talking more frank about it. Like you would cut from like a fan saying, "Oh, Blockbuster was my favorite place. I love to go rent movies from there." And then you'd cut to Lloyd Kaufman saying, "Yeah, Blockbuster sucked. I can't believe they wouldn't carry my Trauma films in the store." So yeah, Blockbuster does have a very rocky history. A lot of people just gravitate towards because that's how they remember video stores. Um, Thankfully, there's still a few video stores around, a few independent ones that are on their last legs, but they're still hanging in there. They're still operating for people who love them. For everyone who's living in Minnesota right now who wants to take advantage of one, please go check out Video Universe. They're over in Robbinsdale. They've been operating there for so long. They still have VHS tapes on the wall there. They have a lot of great content. They have a lot of great Criterion releases and foreign stuff. I think they still have the collection of Dark Shadows on VHS there. They have a whole Yakuza section, and just a section labeled just weird stuff. So definitely go check them out. They're a great local video store, and I'm glad that they've kind of survived the era of Blockbuster and Hollywood. Um, so yeah, so now that we're in the age of streaming content, it seems that that physical media is given less credence. That people aren't as adept to go buy stuff on Blu-ray and DVD. That people would rather watch stuff on streaming. And while it's true, you do have an easier access to it. And I will admit that I do love the fact that now it's easier for people to see films. Like it used to be, like years ago, if I wanted to recommend a film that was up for like Academy Awards or a great foreign film that only had a limited release, people would be saying, well, wait, where's this film? I can't see it because it'll only be playing for like a limited time in art house theaters. Like in particular, like if you wanted to recommend like Akira back in the day before it was on VHS, you'd say, go watch it in an art house theater. Where's the art house theater? Because it wouldn't be playing at like the big chains. Nowadays it's easier because like nowadays everything pretty much is on like some streaming service like HBO Max or Netflix, so there's less of an excuse to say that you haven't seen stuff because now it's like easier at your fingertips. Just to address the people in the chat who are talking about it, yes, there is indeed a Yakuza section there. I believe they might have changed this in there. I haven't been there in quite a while, but I believe there's a Takashi Miike section. They might have reorganized it a bit. But yeah, they do have a whole section there. Yeah, in terms of like art house theaters, like there's stuff like the Lagoon and the Edina Theater, the Uptown Theater, of course, is there. So yeah, like you can go to those theaters, but like again, you have to go downtown, and some people aren't near those theaters. People who live like far up in like like northern Minnesota and stuff like that. So it's easier now than ever to recommend someone go check out a film that might not get as big of a release. But the good thing, though, is that some physical media has actually come about to still survive. Like, as you notice, if you might notice on my wall over here, I have a substantial collection of Criterion. And Criterion DVDs and Blu-rays have actually been kind of one of the top sellers in the physical market. Because among like the big studios, yeah, they favored more specific like streaming services, and their physical media sales have kind of gone down a bit, whereas with Criterion their sales go up, and it's mainly for a few reasons. One is because Criterion releases are like cream of the crop for like for quality, for extras, for and just for like just the packaging. I mean, just look at the cover for House. House is such a wonderful, bizarre Japanese horror film. And that cover just communicates it all. And then you have like neat little like posters. There's great essays, great commentary, and special features on all these DVDs and Blu-rays, which are still coming out to this day. Another reason too is that Criterion has figured out how to get people interested in buying their stuff. Like the way that they do this is they will have two things. They have the Criterion flash sale, which is just like every few months or so. If you keep an eye on Criterion's website, they will have a 24-hour sale where everything is 50% off. And then if you keep an eye on Barnes and Noble, like about twice a year, depending on the year, they will have a Criterion monthly sale where everything in Barnes and Noble will be 50% off. And this attracts a lot of people because then they realize, because like a typical Criterion DVD will sell for $30 and a Blu-ray will sell for $35. Not 35, $40. But then if it's 50% off, it's like, oh, well, a Blu-ray is now $20. Well, I can't pass up this deal. I got to buy it. So a lot of people, myself included, go nuts when the Criterion sale happens. Like everyone jumps on it and basically everything sells out. Like sales just shoot through the roof on those sales. So if you want to get into collecting like quality films, like Criterion is a good place to start. There are other services that do offer good quality content that you can look around for. Like Shout Factory has done a great job bringing a lot of horror films to Blu-ray. Stuff like Event Horizon. Arrow pursues a lot of like underground stuff, which is fun to check out. And another good one is Kino Lorber. Does put out a lot of like art house and kind of like forgotten stuff. Stuff like the David Lynch film, like Wild at Heart and stuff like that. And generally they will have flash sales too. Like Barnes & Noble will also do a sale of like Arrow and Kino Lorber stuff. In fact, actually, Family Video will actually has like Kino Lorber sales. If you keep track of like their emails, they will have like special deals, stuff like that. So you create this market for like like you bring the price down, and that gets more people interested in it, so that you can buy like these quality releases and stuff like that. And it's interesting because like there are obviously like a lot of the stuff in the Criterion you can buy from other distributors for cheaper. Like they have the fantastic Mr. Fox and like Grand Budapest Hotel, Wes Anderson films. You can get them cheaper on like the studio release like Blu-rays and DVDs, but you won't get as many extras. And it doesn't have like the same cool covers and the prestige and the posters and all that. And Criterion also has its own streaming channel right now, the Criterion channel, where pretty much a good chunk of their releases are on the site right now, and they shift between them every now and then. So with all that included, you still see the Criterion DVDs and Blu-rays flying off the shelves. And you also see stuff like it happens with anime too. Like you see the Crusher Joe release I've got over there is a Discotek release, and Discotek is as I'm sure like a few people like Tony in chat will tell you, Discotek embraces a lot of the old school anime and will release stuff that us old farts really gravitate towards, stuff like Lupin and bizarre stuff like Chargeman Ken and stuff like that. They'll release and just have these very quality releases. So we're in a very interesting time now where if you're going to collect stuff on DVD, you expect kind of like quality releases and stuff like that. You will invest in stuff like that. Like you will see stuff like Grand Budapest Hotel and the fantastic Mr. Fox will fly off shelves a lot faster over at Criterion than it will with like the typical release from Fox over on their end. And it's mainly it costs more, but it offers a lot more quality and better quality release and stuff like that people pay attention to that, and they want to have that in their collection, and it makes a nice collection. Mainly because like the Criterion, they number all their releases, so so my collection has kind of been like collecting Pokemon. Like here's Pokemon number 123 I've got, and here's like I can pull off and like look at the spine and stuff like that. So yeah, it's been a lot more fun to collect stuff like that. It also stores well better than VHS. I used to collect VHS back in the day, and it was so expensive that even with as bulky as these tapes are, I had my whole collection in a shoebox. That's how much I could afford. And at the time I was trying to collect like Cowboy Bebop and some of the Ranma tapes, and that was an expensive ordeal that they all fit in like a shoebox. So yeah, we only got like a few minutes left, so I'll take the time to answer any questions or address chat here. So let's see. Allison said, I think, referring to Discotek, I think they did Unico, which they did. Yep. And that movie was my white whale for years, and I waited exactly 0 seconds before buying the DVD when I spotted them. Yep. A lot of releases that never saw the light of day on DVD finally came to Discotek. One of my favorites was the anime version of The Little Mermaid. which is one of the more faithful retellings. It was on VHS from like Star Maker Entertainment, and I used to watch it all the time at my grandma's house when I was little. And to finally have it on DVD was like so vindicating. Like I bought it immediately. Another great release is they finally released the Tezuka film Cleopatra, which was kind of considered the first adult animated feature from 1970s, which is such a bizarre and surreal retelling of the Legend of Cleopatra that that it's difficult to describe how weird this film is, that you just have to see it. Um, Especially like interesting claim to fame is that Cleopatra actually lost money, and because it did so poorly in Japan, when it came over to the States, it was rebranded as a porno because it had some sex in it. But because there wasn't enough sex in it, that crowd gravitated away from it. They were angry. They were like, they demanded their money back from the theater from it, and that release failed as well. So it's a bit of a failure at the time, and the fact that it failed in America when being rebranded is that I think Tezuka heard this information. It was kind of like, good. I don't want it to be seen as that. I made it to be like a fun comedy, not to be seen as that. So yeah, all these kind of little forgotten, little hidden gems of anime. I'm so glad are coming to light on physical media. They are kind of getting into other like streaming services. Like I believe there's like a like Retro Crush, and like on Amazon Prime, you can actually find quite a lot of the discotheque releases. So I'm glad that there's more exposure there, but nothing will beat having it so cool. Having that cool physical release with the cool covers and on DVD like that, because then you can just pull it off the shelf and just watch and just be like just look at this crazy cool collection I've got, instead of just like, hey, look at my Voodoo account of digital copies I bought. So there's something more like I'm sure like if you watch that Blockbuster documentary, they talk about it as well, but just having a tangible copy, physical copy in your hands, not relying on like the digital rights that you have to buy and borrow from, is so much better. It's so much better to have just something that you can hold and just pick up and look at, and just the experience of just going out and looking for VHS tapes like that, like like a Goodwill or a CD warehouse or something like that. There's just something so fun about it. It's more fun to collect tapes and go out look for them and trade them with people than just buying something off like Voodoo and stuff like that. And I understand the appeal of it. You can spread it more. It's easier to see that stuff. But that's like the good thing about stuff like Criterion. If the films are really good and people really love them, and it's not just like something you go out and you watch and you dispose of it, and you don't think of it ever again, like a DivX disc, you invest in it, and you want to have like the prime quality of it, because that's the way I want to watch this stuff. I love House, but I don't want to watch it, watch it forever on like like a streaming channel that will just keep cutting out, or if the internet goes out, I can't watch it. I mean, heck, if my internet goes out, I can just heck, I'll just pop in one of my favorite Criterions and just watch it on a great HD television and great quality, and not have to worry about the internet dropping or the quality dropping. So that's the biggest benefit, I think, still, that people that I think people still gravitate towards quality releases like that. I would love to see a poll of how many people of the ages of 18 to 25 buy physical. It'd be interesting. I'd be willing to bet that like not all, but like a handful of the younger crowd would like to invest in DVDs, and especially when you consider the fact that a lot of the cheaper stuff from the older releases, you can go out and find it like half price books, or like cheapo downtown or stuff like that. You can poke around and find some pretty cheap releases. Um, like no joke, there's a video store over in Stillwater that I love going to, that they sell a whole bunch of like old VHS tapes and stuff like that. I've actually found like Criterion DVDs, which were for like $5 one time. I haven't found any since. Like I try to keep an eye on them, seeing like, where the hell did you get this stuff? But generally, but generally, yeah, if you go out looking for stuff, you can find some great deals on stuff like that. Um, and I think there's also an incentive too to buy physical media, because you can actually scan in physical media to get digital copies now. Like Voodoo has this app on your phone where if you buy a digital copy, you can scan in the barcode, it'll recognize it, and then you just pay like $2, and then you have the digital copy as well. So I would say that's even more of an incentive to go out and buy DVDs. See, someone needs to pick up Angel's Egg. I see movies and anime going the way of vinyl for physical releases. I think there's always going to be some kind of market. Definitely. I think eventually, like, people are going to get sick of, one day soon, those movies anywhere lockers are gonna, somebody's gonna get angry. They're gonna take away the digital rights to something, and something that you've paid like $15 for digitally is gonna go away. Whereas no one's going to come for my Blu-rays and DVDs. There's going to be no lock on there. You still have players that will play them. Some of them, yeah, they do require firmware updates, but they're not going to like rip it off like the shelf from you. It's not like with like digital copies where they, it's more of like an agreement of borrowing something to have in a digital locker. Uh, what's your holy grail to find, Mark? The holy grail, of a very rare DVD or tape. It's hard to say. Like, what might be one that I'd love to have. You can kind of find it, but it's pretty expensive. But it's the very first Criterion release. It's out of print. I doubt it'll ever come back. It might. Not sure if it will, but I would say like their first Criterion release of Grand Illusion, this World War I film. Either that or my favorite Yasujiro Ozu film of Floating Weeds, which actually came in a double pack of like Yasujiro Ozu's first film with that. Those are my favorite Criterion releases that are currently out of print. But Criterion releases, they kind of come in and out of going out of like print and reprint. So hopefully one day, like, that's the great thing. Even when stuff is out of print, chances are somebody out there is looking for that content to bring more new stuff out from, dig it out as a hidden gem and bring it out into a physical release that everyone can enjoy. So we're in a great age for digging up stuff like that. Discotech does it, Criterion does it, Arrow does it, Kino Lorber does it. It's a great time for physical media. So there you go. So I think we're at the end of our panel here. So yeah, if you want to check out more of my writings, check out movieswithmark.com. I'm also on Twitch, YouTube, and Twitter if you want to find me there. And yeah, and you can find more of my stuff there. So thank you everyone for coming out to this panel.